Hey, what's going on YouTube, and welcome to another Season 7 League of Legends video. I've been getting a lot of questions about what I think about the new item changes in 7.9, so I decided I'm just going to make a video and answer them all at once. There's a lot of really good items, but some of them are pretty situational. I'm going to be covering all the major item changes except for the support items. I will be making a separate video for those. Items with very minor changes I won't be covering in this video. With that being said, let's now hop into some of the item changes. So let's kick it off by looking at one of our new items, the Adaptive Helm. This is a pretty solid early and mid-game buy because it only costs 2,800 gold and is excellent for tanks. With 10% CDR, 300 health, a bunch of health regeneration, and 55 magic resist, this is a very solid choice against an AP laner. This item, however, will still be outdone by the new Abyssal Sceptre unless you make really good use of the passive. This makes it a pretty situational item because you have to use it against a champion that uses the same spell over and over again to make great use of the item. As long as they're using the same spell within 4 seconds, it will reduce the damage of it by 15%. So immediately you know it's going to be great against Ryze's Q and Cassiopeia's E. They're able to spam their abilities over and over again and do a lot of damage, but you can reduce it by 15%. It'll also be pretty decent against Kayle and Teemo's E because it will block a portion of that damage, but they are hybrids, so a lot will still get through. This is also going to be pretty decent against things that do damage over time like Singe's Q, because of course it will reduce that damage as well. It's a pretty damn solid item, especially against spammy champions. So next let's quickly look at its biggest item rival, the Abyssal Sceptre. This item has gained 300 health, 100% bonus health regeneration, but it has lost all of its ability power. This item is pretty identical to the Adaptive Helm now, the only difference being 10 extra magic resistance and of course the different passives. The Abyssal Sceptre still makes nearby enemy champions take 10% more magic damage and is unchanged. So that basically means unless you make really good use of Adaptive Helm's passive, you may as well go for this item because you get 10% more CDR and a better passive that you can actually make use of. I feel like the Abyssal Sceptre is pretty much a must-buy on tanky champions now, especially if there is AP on the enemy team. And of course, as long as you do magic damage. If you are a champion that abuses healing, then obviously you're still going to go for the Spirit Visage, but Abyssal Sceptre is now a fantastic item. You're pretty much never going to see it on your mid laner now, but you're probably going to see it a lot more often in those tanky AP top laners and tanky AP junglers. Let's now look at another brand new item, the Gargoyle Stoneplate. This item only costs 2,500 gold and it gives you 40 armor and 40 magic resist. Its first passive is Stone Skin, and it's really strong because as long as there's 3 or more nearby enemy champions, you will be granted another 40 bonus armor and 40 magic resist. That means in team fights, you're going to have 80 armor and 80 magic resist from a single item, which is quite a lot. You don't get any health from the actual item, but when you do activate it, it changes in a pretty damn big way. So when activated, you increase your max health by 40% and increase your champion size, but reduce the damage you deal by 60% for 4 seconds. If Stone Skin is active, which means you're near at least 3 enemy champions, you will instead increase your health by 100%. So, therefore, this item is pretty crazy. Imagine a Cho'Gath that jumps into a team fight, uses all of his abilities, mows down on the enemy AD carry and deletes them, and then activates this while all his abilities are in cooldown, and gets a monstrous amount of health. You're basically going to be unkillable for that duration, and when you pop out, you're going to have your cooldowns back, and you can try to delete another target. This is going to be a really strong item to get, especially if you're against a well-balanced team that has a lot of AP and AD. I imagine you're going to be seeing this on tanky champions all the time now, especially those ones that jump right into the middle of a fight. The increased champion size is actually a really nice thing because you will be able to soak skill shots really easily for your team. Now let's look at some changes to our burn items in both the Sunfire Cape and Cinderhulk. First, the Sunfire Cape went from 500 health to 425, but it did go from 50 to 60 armor. The burn damage on both, however, has dropped. On the Sunfire Cape, it went from between 26 and 43 to 12 to 29. On the Cinderhulk, it then went from 9 to 43 to 12 to 29. Both did drop pretty significantly, and if you are buying this item to duel enemy champions, then it's probably not going to be that worth it anymore. Both, however, are still really solid at split pushing. The burn damage versus minions and monsters quadrupled on the Sunfire Cape, and on the Cinderhulk, the bonus doubled. So if you want some help farming, both of these items are still fantastic. Keep in mind, however, that the burn radius did go from 400 to 325, so you have to be closer to them. Both are really solid items if you're looking for some early tankiness, but as I previously stated, if you are looking for an item for added dueling potential, then these probably aren't the ones you want to get anymore. Either way, in the end, at least they are still pretty decent items. The rest of the tanky items I'm not even going to bother covering because all they really did was lose health, but gain armor or magic resist. Spirit Visage got a bit more plus healing, and Randuin's got a bit more damage reduction on crits, but other than that, they're pretty much identical. It seems that Riot would prefer having people with high magic resistant armor as opposed to a really high health pool. Completely understandable because of items like the Gargoyle Stoneplate. Now let's look at the Banshee's Veil, which has now become a mage item. The Abyssal Sceptre is obviously no longer worth purchasing, but now you have the Banshee's Veil. This item no longer has 300 health and 100% health regeneration, and the magic resist dropped from 70 to 45. But you did however gain 70 ability power and 10% cooldown reduction. Banshee's Veil also retains its passive that grants a spell shield that blocks the next enemy ability. Just like before, it still has a 40-second cooldown. So this is now a very interesting buy for mid laners and very viable. I've pretty much been seeing this in all of my games lately. Something rather immobile in the mid lane like a Veigar can now pick up a Banshee's Veil and be a lot safer. If an Ahri wants to go for an all-in on him, well, he can either block the charm or part of the Q damage. With that being said though, this is definitely not only good on immobile mages, it's great on all mages. It seems to be becoming a core item on a lot of them out there. If you're looking for a pure offensive build, this is still not the best item for you, but it's great for those champions that want to scale up and be a bit safer. We even have a change to one of the starter items in the Doran shield. The first thing to note here is the cost went from 450 to 400 gold, which means you can get an extra health potion and can really help your lane phase. The health and regeneration has remained unchanged, but you did get your flat damage reduction removed. It no longer reduces damage from basic attacks or single target spells. This item did however get two new things, the first one being Shield Slam, which makes your basic attacks deal plus 5 damage to minions. For all those people that struggle at last hitting and didn't like picking up a Doran shield because of it, now this is kind of solved. This item also gained a unique passive that makes you regain 20 health over 10 seconds after taking damage from an enemy champion. This now means that it's great against all champions. If you feel that you're in a very hard matchup, then Doran's shield is now a very viable buy. People would kind of try to avoid buying this item whenever they could, but now it's very solid in those hard matchups. With this new item, as long as you are buying it, you're going to have a better chance of actually dealing with your hard matchups, and it's not going to be that big of an issue anymore. Just make sure that if you know you're going to be struggling, that you actually buy it for once. Another really nice item change was the Sterak's Gage. It's becoming pretty damn common again. The health remained unchanged, but the basic attack damage went from 25% to 30%. They've also decided to change the shield. It went from 30% of your maximum health for 3 seconds to 75% of your bonus health for 8 seconds. That means, of course, the shield is going to last longer, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to wait out the shield and do your damage. You're pretty much going to have to go through the shield if you want to kill a champion. This is going to add some really nice tankiness onto bruisers, and it's why I see the item pretty much all the time now. As for Sterak's Fury, you used to gain 25% additional base damage, but that is now up to 40% additional base damage. Yet again, making this item even stronger and a very solid pick on bruiser champions. It's been added into my core build for a bunch of champions because it's just too damn strong not to put into your core build. It's still not a must buy if you don't have really good base attack damage, but it is very strong on champions like Darius. With all the awesome item changes for everybody else, AD carries got a little bit of love as well. The first thing comes in the form of the Guardian Angel. This item went from 60 armor to 30 armor and it lost all its magic resist, but it did gain 40 attack damage. The passive has pretty much still stayed the same, but instead it restores 50% of your base health instead of that max health. This is completely fine for an AD carry because you don't have a ton of health anyways, but for a really tanky champion, you're not really going to want to buy a Guardian Angel anymore. Its defensives are greatly reduced, and restoring base health is not the best thing for you. With the 40 attack damage it gives, you can even buy this item pretty early on. If there is a bunch of high damage threats on the map, I've been seeing people buy this even as their third item. It's not something you have to save for the really late game anymore. You can buy one pretty early on and save your life multiple times. If you're an AD carry, you're probably going to want to buy this item most games, but if you're anybody else, try to avoid it. It's not that great for you anymore. There's also been some very minor changes to your crit items. The total gold on the Infinity Edge and the Essence Reaver has gone from 3600 to 3400. The Zeal has then gone from 1300 gold to 1200 gold. Obviously not that big of a change, but since tanks are getting a bit stronger, this reduced gold is kind of nice because you can get these items just a little bit easier and kind of deal with them. This will also make champions that go for a high crit build a little bit more viable because the Blade of the Ruin King has 100 extra gold added on top of it, and these lost 200 gold. Other than that, not too much else to say about them, just be glad that you can buy them just a little bit earlier. Most of the attack speed crit items are pretty similar, there is some minor changes, but the major one would be to the Runaan's Hurricane. They have decided to remove the on-hit damage. This will no longer grant on-hit damage. That means for people that were going for Blade of the Ruined King into Runaan's Hurricane, that build is not so viable anymore. Of course, same goes for Kaels and Teemos in the top lane that would go for a Nashor's Tooth into a Runaan's. You may want to consider replacing the Runaan's Hurricane with something else. They did, however, increase the secondary bolt damage from 25% to 40%. That means for champions like Caitlyn that were going for the Runaan's Hurricane after a BF sword, it's still going to be a very strong item. On somebody like a Caitlyn, it's primarily used as a way to AoE clear minion waves really quickly and get a lot of items, and it still serves that purpose, even more so with that increased secondary bolt damage. It won't be as strong on some champions, but it's still going to be a very, very viable item on other champions. That's kind of the way I like items in League of Legends anyways. I don't like an item having to be on every single champion. There was also some changes to the lifesteal items. Like I did say, the cost of the Blade of the Ruined King went from 3,300 to 3,400, but the other items got some nice changes. The Death's Dance, Bloodthirster, and Ravenous Hydra all went from 75 to 80 damage. The damage deferred on the Death's Dance also went from 15 to 30%. Even though the Blade of the Ruined King went up 100 gold, it's still going to be very viable because it's going to be a tank meta. The added damage it provides is still going to be very solid for dealing with tanks. The other items gaining 5 attack damage are pretty nice, however, and they're going to work really great on stuff like Camille and Fiora. When you add these minor buffs with stuff like the Sterak's Gage, it's going to allow them to actually survive in a tanky meta. Definitely not the craziest changes out there, but hopefully they will be enough so we don't have to see tanky champions over and over again in the top lane and the jungle. That tends to get pretty boring pretty quickly. Last tier we have the armor penetration changes, and these ones here I'm not too keen about. They've made it so all these items go from 45 to 35% penetration, and the Black Cleaver only has a maximum of 24%. When they're deciding to reduce health but giving people a lot more armor, I don't really necessarily understand why the armor penetration was also gutted. I feel like because of these changes, tanks are going to be incredibly strong, and there's not going to be too much you can do about it. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but these are pretty harsh changes. Unless your top laner has a Black Cleaver, which I don't think they're going to go for too often now, and you have some penetration yourself, you're not going to do a ton of damage. Sure, there was obviously some changes to lifesteal and crit items, but they were very, very minor. 10% armor penetration is quite a lot. At least as an AD carry player, you're going to have a Guardian Angel, so when a tank kills you, you can come back to life and hopefully kill them with your second life. That probably sounds really sarcastic, but I'm also kind of serious. But that, ladies and gentlemen, covers everything I've got to say on the item changes and patch 7.9 for Season 7. Don't forget to check out the video description below for a link to all my social medias. I have a Discord server down there, a Patreon, all sorts of different things. I also stream most nights on Tuesday at 7 PM Eastern, so that's definitely one you should check out as well. Also, if you guys did like the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and if you agree or disagree with anything I said in the video, please let me know down in the comments. This is the first video I've ever done on patch notes, so if you guys did enjoy it, please let me know, and I will be sure to make more if you guys do like them. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching the video, I really do appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, and peace.